thoughts harbored inside of you, if you have great ideas and they never get shared with others, the likelihood of moving forward together or moving forward on your own just isn't as easy without a.
Hey everyone, this is Rebecca at Close.io bringing you our interview series featuring women in sales, where we find out how they grow and thrive both personally and professionally. In this episode, I'm speaking with Megan Muldary. Thanks so much for being here. Tell us your position at Tune and a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so I am currently our Director of Sales Operations at Tune. We are a Seattle-based startup that helps web and mobile measurement for either app developers or affiliate networks.
Prior to Tune, Megan was a sales operations manager at the platform and has worked at San Gennaro Foods as an office manager and at Salem Media Group in marketing and promotions. She graduated from Western Washington University with a BA in journalism and a minor in history. Megan, how did you get the job at Tune? And, you mentioned that you grew from a sales type of role to a more sales operation and leadership type of role. Can you discuss that transition with us as well?
Yeah, so I'll start with the transition over to Tune. I was fortunate enough actually to be recruited away from the Platform for Media, which was a Comcast subsidiary at the time. While at the platform, I started out in a lead qualification role. And from there, oftentimes once you qualify leads, the next general step is to start to try to close business. I realized very quickly that I wasn't very efficient at actually asking for the close. I wasn't naturally a salesperson, and I took it pretty personal when people would say no or push off my conversations. But what I was pretty passionate about and where I naturally felt a good fit was in the operations side. How could I make my day more efficient? How could I get better information? I think it goes back to my journalism background a little bit, where I like to ask questions, I like to gather details, and I like to put it together in a concise format and package. So sales ops just was naturally a really great fit. And I think because of the way that I communicate with others and, like to problem solve, it went into a leadership position rather quickly.
Would you say that the more analytical and critical thinking type of approach is what drew you to that side of sales?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing for any business would be to speed up their sales cycle. And knowing the tool side of the sales process, trying to gather that information for how to make a sale close faster, all of that analysis is just naturally interesting to me. And it passes the time very easily, in all honesty. So then it's also like a puzzle if you have the right information and you can, tell a story with it and make some assumptions, and then those assumptions play to be true. It naturally makes it into a more efficient sales. You have results, you can drive behaviors. Most sales organizations would love that type of impact.
Totally. And in my previous episode with Shika Bindra, we talked about sales being a process of trial and error. So I appreciate you sharing with us that maybe a traditional sales type of closer type of role wasn't exactly for you. But, shout out to everybody in sales enablement and people that are driving revenue through the more operational side of actually growing the entire business. It's not just traditional sales. And I think we're seeing that more, and it's a really exciting sort of occupational growth in our space that this is happening. And that just means more opportunities for everyone.
Oh, most definitely. I think there's something very natural about the way teams can work together. And I think with something like sales, it's no longer one person cold calling or going door to door. When it comes to SaaS businesses, you really need to operationalize and streamline that process, from the marketing gathering all the way through to finance billing. And I mean, sales operations has been crucial with that in the companies that I've worked for.
It's so cool that you've also been able to apply your educational background in journalism. And you've recently become very passionate about communication, and I'm excited for that to be the theme of today's discussion. You have become very passionate about communication both at work and in one's personal life. How did that subject arise for you, and what sort of discussions led up to that, or what sort of discussions did you facilitate leading up to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime, I guess professionally, it started really with transitions and rapid growth in a software environment, right? In the startup world, there's constant change, and you really need to be able to facilitate the conversations in order to keep the ball moving forward. Otherwise, you get stuck in a rut. I firmly believe don't do things the way you've always done them just because it's how you've always done them. There's always a way to do things better, and a lot of times that takes the teamwork. So I think seeing that and seeing the impact it can have when you're willing to be the one to ask questions and speak up in a room, that definitely is what got me started on the personal side of things, in the side of mental health. And I just saw a marriage counselor. I was going through a divorce. I worked with psychologists, like being able to be confident in what you speak about, but also understand that there's vulnerability for everybody, and not everybody learns the same way, not everybody speaks the same way, not everybody listens the same way. All of those pieces kind of fit together at once, and now it's just something that's near and dear to my heart, and I like to make sure that everybody's aware that it's something we can all continue to improve on.
That makes my heart so happy. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've recently become very interested in grace. My dad defines grace as emitting joy and for others to feel that you're a joy to be around. And I've done a lot of reflection in terms of my relationships as well, especially with my parents. And I find that with a lot of immigrant families, communication is very tense because, they're coming from two different entire places, both culturally and in terms of values. And I've recently come to realize that, to communicate with grace is so powerful. And power is traditionally seen as kind of like brute force or dominance. But
Yep.
there is a softer and more gentler version of that called grace.
Oh, most definitely. And I think, I mean, if you take it back to the workplace, when you know what is going on in someone's personal life, it makes it easier to work with them in their professional world. That might just be my own experience, but it's almost always there is an outside factor when somebody is being abrupt or um, unreasonable. When you feel like you're being attacked, that brute force. If you feel like um, somebody's just being stubborn or they lack, the energy, or there's something missing. In my experience, it's always been an outside influencer. Very rarely is it something that you personally have done to the other individual.
There's a lot of empathy in order to recognize that and not take it personally, though.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm definitely not perfect at it. It's something that I focus on all of the time. Anybody that's worked with me knows I'm a very heart forward person, which means I can take things pretty personal sometimes. But my newest thing is I like to journal, and I like to write out my email drafts, my Slack responses, and then I give it a moment. I do some breathing, make sure it is tactful, it is actionable. It doesn't make a lot of assumptions. I think a lot of times we make assumptions just in our tone of voice or in the words that we choose. And focusing on all of those pieces, it makes for almost more credibility, especially when you go towards a leadership position. If you don't, what's the word I'm looking for? If you don't put somebody in a tight spot by making an assumption, then they're more likely to come to you with, questions or curiosities and work with you as a team.
Hmm. The topic of leadership definitely plays into graceful communication. I often think about how being an older sibling to my younger brother, who is 8 years younger, that's a form of leadership, and that he needs to see that I am communicating in a way with tact and with grace, because if I don't and I'm in a heated discussion with my parents, he's not going to see that. He's not going to get that role model from anybody else in our household. So taking that ownership for somebody else and wanting to be and exemplify sort of a good framework for communication is something that I never considered before, but once I did, I was really, really more motivated to improve in that way.
Exactly. And whether it's your personal life or professional life, I mean, I really think um, That's what we need more right now, is folks to realize that they are in a leadership role no matter where they're at in their career. Everybody has the chance to be a role model for someone.
Love it. In your gathering, the Tune Women's discussion on communication, you included a meme that says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think I know what I mean by this because it happens all the time. But what does that mean? Tell us what that means.
Yeah. We have a thing where we really love memes here at Tune.
So do we.
Yeah, I think company. But it for me, that meme was the way that I started off my presentation around communication. Just in that you have to talk in order to have communication, right? If you keep thoughts harbored inside of you, if you have great ideas and they never get shared with others, the likelihood of moving forward together or moving forward on your own just isn't as easy without a tribe of people behind you. And that has to be shared and communicated in whatever form communication is best for you. I'm a huge fan of writing. I do speak up in meetings, but very rarely will you see me be the one to host a meeting to host a meeting. I would much rather gather my thoughts and outline them and work on it and draft it and make sure it's exactly the message that I want to send with the results that I want to see. And so for me, the starting off that meme was just making sure that everybody is aware through communication what the topic is at hand. What are you going to cover? What is the ask? What is even just the result of maybe something else that had happened? There doesn't have to be an ask. Maybe you're doing a retroactive. How did our marketing project turn out? What were the results of it? What could we do better next time? All of those things I think we're getting better at in the workplace. But I know I've definitely had some situations where you're just left in the dark, and then no longer do you have that camaraderie with your colleagues or that fight in you to make the business succeed. In my experience, the more you share with your team members or colleagues, the more you guys can all drive towards the same effort and same goal.
That sounds a lot like alignment.
Yes. Very, very much so. I think it goes really hand in hand because if everybody's on a different page, because either the information isn't shared or maybe, I've seen where teams kind of hold onto these ideas because they're not quite sure all of the answers yet. Well, you might have somebody who can help you with all of those answers. You might have somebody who has gone through the same thing, but without even sharing the situation that you're in, you won't know because that person can't read your mind to speak up and help you.
What do you find are the most common reasons that people don't speak up or just don't think to share what they're going through? Is it because they're scared? Is it because they feel like they have no place to? Or, what is it really? Because I find that sometimes I'll get into this self-talk about a certain type of situation and I don't even realize that I'm engaging in that self-talk. I'm not even fully aware, but maybe if I look at what some of the common patterns are, I can start to recognize that in myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's different, obviously, but the biggest one that I would say is this idea of vulnerability. It's very, very vulnerable to put out. Um, it's not always an emotional side of things, but no matter what, even to put yourself out there with an idea, right? If you're a junior developer on a team and you've only been employed there for 6 weeks, who are you to speak up at a meeting? Who are you to have ideas? Well, in reality, you're the exact person we should hear from, right? You're new, you're fresh perspective. Maybe you have, education in something that we haven't tried before. It's just what happens if you get shut down? What happens if somebody steps on your toes? What happens if somebody steals your idea? It's all things that are sadly pretty commonplace. And I think sometimes if they happen too often, then somebody's not going to put themselves out there again. They're not going to speak up again. So that vulnerability to put yourself at risk for an emotional hurt or a mental hurt, kind of have to overcome that. And I think really the way to do that is just to keep at it, keep practicing. I have, my tribe of colleagues here at Tune that when I'm really, really fired up about something, I run everything by them. I try to make sure, that I'm being rational, that I have a good point, that I have a good idea, that it's, feasible for execution. I try to get, well-rounded opinions from various different departments before I present something, because I have been put down in the workplace environment. I have been told something is silly or I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm also, whether it be my age, I'm in my mid 30s, I'm old enough or experienced enough, or kind of just in this screw it mentality. I'm going to do it and I'm going to see what there is, because if I think that passionate and that positive experience will happen for others, then I would like to be that example.
Hmm. Can you give us some advice on communicating with colleagues that are more reserved and hard to read and tight-lipped? And this just came up because I was having a discussion with a girlfriend about, a really small team that she's recently just joined. And as she was describing her day-to-day interactions with her newfound colleagues, I was saying, wow, I could never be in that situation. That seems so hard. And she was saying, well, yeah, I've recently just developed this skill to become better at it.
Yeah, I think, it goes back to knowing people personally besides just professionally. Sometimes that just takes time, which, you have to have time on your side. Some places don't allow that. But I think what I've learned is the folks who are reserved, or tight lipped are protecting themselves. So maybe they've had colleagues that have stolen their ideas, or maybe they have other plans and they just aren't on the same team. They don't want to stay at that same uh, company for a very long period of time while everybody else does. None of those are bad. I think we need to realize as a society, everybody's going to change jobs. Everybody's going to focus on their own career growth. Those are all fine things. And maybe we can just be resources for one another while we were in the same space. So I think, top two would be learning about them personally and learning about them professionally. What's their career aspiration? What is their family life, or what is their personal goals right now? Do they brew their own beer on the side, or are they trying to build out their own website for this entrepreneurial idea? Finding those type of open-ended questions to get people to share more and more. There's just naturally something in your human nature that then you're going to trust someone, and then you will be able to communicate with them more effectively.
I love that. It's like if they're not going to come up to you right away, you can bring yourself to them.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I think the more you share, I apologize all the time to people because I'm a total oversharer. Hopefully, never in an obtrusive way, but I think the more I can share my experiences of, whether it be qualifying leads or cold calling or writing up a marketing email campaign for the first time, all of those are, hard things to get over. But if we share our experiences amongst all of us, then we can grow. And I think
Mm.
everybody wants that opportunity to grow.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I used to sort of beat myself up over kind of being so emotional and worrying so much and kind of over communicating until I realized that my sensitivity is a gift, and my ability to basically have this broad spectrum of emotions and to really empathize with people and always be on their side. And that sensitivity is something that actually enables me and makes me who I am rather than um, making me weak, which I think, not just our society, me personally, I've definitely perceived sensitive types as a form of weakness when that is so not true.
I could not agree with you more. I have definitely, I was born and raised really heart forward, but also in the business world, you don't show emotion. You're supposed to just ask for more, close more business, have that, grow mentality. But in reality, I can't hide who I am, and there's no reason I should ever try. And so, everybody on our C team has seen me cry. They've seen me curse. They've seen me need to take some personal days. Um, being naturally who I am also makes them, I think, understand that when I get super passionate about something, it comes from a good place. It comes from the place of wanting everybody on the same page, of being a people forward person, of wanting us all to succeed and be happy. I think the more you are okay with your own emotions, the easier that is. There's still moments I struggle with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, the moment we hire anybody new, we hired a new CFO and CCO roughly over a year ago. And when they came on board, my first one-on-ones with both of them, I told them straight up, you will see me cry. You will probably have to tell me to stop asking questions or that something's not my business. But my job is to be really the alignment between sales, marketing, legal, finance, operations to me touches all departments at a company. So I am going to be emotions and heart and that feistiness that startups have. I don't think I'll ever lose that. And my whole goal is to make everything as transparent as possible and to get us all on the same page so we can move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're all in this together, right? Yesterday, one of our engineers was like, I like effing hate this stack that he was working on," and then he was like, "Oh, so sorry, I just had to vent." And I replied, being like, "Hey, we're always here whenever you need to rant. Like, hugs and deep breaths all around. That's what we're all here for, because when we are so invested, we care so much, and that's where our intensity comes from, but it's always from a good place, even if you're
Exactly.
cursing and crying."
It's so true. It's so true. But it is good. And I think that communication between the two of you, right, that's huge. The fact that, somebody recognized that their outburst might have been inappropriate, but was okay to say, no, I mean, it just is what it is. And you validated it. That's great. That's very trust building.
Right. That solidifies our bond.
Hmm.
I want to know how we initiate dialogue about an issue so that it comes across in a way that we're truly discussing this, and it's not me or, you uh, communicating that to somebody else in a one way kind of stream of, feedback. It can often come across that way, or maybe people get defensive immediately, and it's hard to bring them into that discussion.
I really think setting up the context for the discussion, when anybody's taken aback through an abrupt topic, right? If somebody doesn't, or if somebody thinks they're doing a great job at their job, that they're meeting all the requirements, they're perfect and deserve all these promotions, but in reality, everybody else's experience with them is something different. Your job as a manager or as a colleague, if you're in that place, is to make sure that you let them know ahead of time, hey, you know, either this situation wasn't okay, or next time could you add more empathy, or let's talk in our next one-on-one, about this situation where you rolled out something and how we would maybe do it better the next time. I think setting up, um, that broad framework for the conversation makes it feel more of a discussion and less like a slap on the hand, right? We're not 10 years old anymore being punished by our parents for, not taking up the trash. It's now this working environment where we spend more time with our colleagues usually than we do our own families. So you have
Mm.
to set boundaries. You have to communicate in a way that you're working towards, the same outcome. So yeah, I guess in my experience, it's always share what the conversation is about in enough
Mm.
time so that the other person can prepare as well, emotionally and mentally. Maybe they have
Mm.
reasons why they did something a certain way. And if you just ask them about it abruptly or tell them that they're wrong, a lot of people are just going to shut down. They're not going to give you feedback, or they're just going to say, screw it. Fine, then I won't do that anymore. I won't help you anymore.
Right.
That doesn't help anybody.
You cannot overlook the fact that when you're working on a team, you rely on each other. So if you crush that person, it's going to do, it's the detriment is done to everyone, including yourself. So it is not productive in any way.
Yep, and it can become really toxic really, really quick, right?
Oh yeah.
Especially if it's in like a big group team meeting setting, right? And your manager just tells you that you're an idiot or that you did something wrong, or that, your release totally failed and you should try harder next time. Like, I cannot wait for the day where those things are the least likely to happen, instead of how often I still hear about them happening, right, in workspaces. Because I just think that creates a really toxic chemistry amongst everybody on the team. Your employees aren't going to trust you as a manager anymore. They're going to be scared, because what happens if they're the next one, right, to get called out? And then that person individually, I think the more you get either irrationally communicated with or punished, the more likely you're going to keep on recluding yourself away.
One last question, and this comes from many discussions that I find I have typically with colleagues that work at startups. So it's the question of how to communicate when you feel undervalued. And I just want to preface this by saying that it's mainly just because when you're working at a startup, you tend to wear many hats. And I think in those situations where it's not like you're getting a super structured, tiered performance review or a set of, positions to climb the corporate ladder up to. It's like everybody's not really sure exactly all the time, how this whole thing is supposed to be, how this struck, because we're all making it up or trying to figure it out, right? So how can we clear the air with our managers and our colleagues?
I definitely think so. To go back to some of like a personal idea, if you've ever read the Five Love Languages book,
Yes.
um, it's been around for forever. And I know some of those are super not an appropriate way to show any emotion towards a colleague, but there's still, everybody has a driving emotion where they feel valued and where they feel connected to you. So, in my experience with most sellers, like account executives, people who close business, they're driven by either a paycheck or by praise and recognition. So once you figure out, does person A just want all the warm leads? They want to close business. They want to be left alone so they can call. Perfect. Okay, here you go. We'll make sure, you understand your comp plan, you understand when payout schedules are, you understand how to see that achievement through the month or quarter goal that you have set forth. But if you're on the other side and you really like praise and recognition, you need to make sure that there's that feedback channel of, so and so did a phenomenal job this week with the tone of voice in this email thread. It needs to be, in my experience, more with recognition. It needs to be consistent and pretty constant. You need to make sure that, everybody on the team feels like they are getting praised at some point for something that they have done. If you yourself feel undervalued, it's a hard spot to be in, but unfortunately you have to bring it up and ask, what else can I do to show you my skill set or what I've achieved or how to get to that next promotion. I want this title. I'm doing all of these things that are commonly found associated with that title. What else do you need to see from me so I can achieve that? Because sometimes too, right, you said it yourself perfectly, that in the startup world, we are all so busy that, it's not even a personal thing. Oftentimes it's just everybody's busy with their own achievements and with their own goals. So you don't necessarily notice all the great things that somebody else is doing, and you have to be your best advocate.
Lovely. Thank you so much for being a heart forward leader and for being on the Close.io Women in Sales interview series. Megan, where can people find and connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn is probably the best. To my knowledge, I'm the only Megan Muldary, so it should be relatively easy.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. If you have questions that you'd like our guests to answer, or if you know of a woman in sales that we should feature, email me, Rebecca@close.io. That's with 1B and 2 C's. And if you enjoyed this episode, got value out of it, got inspired, share it with a friend. There's a link in the description where you can also find show notes. And you can follow this series by subscribing to Close.io's YouTube channel, iTunes, SoundCloud, and various other podcast apps that you might already use. See you guys on the next one.